I've been told I only have 5 seconds to get people's attention or YouTube won't show my video, so how'd that work for you? Hey everybody, I'm Sean Bewley the Kid, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Billy the Kid and people's interpretation of history. Over the years, people have written history books and biographies on people, even though they know very little about them. Now, when it comes to Billy the Kid, we know some about him, but we don't know everything. So what often happens is somebody will write a book, and then a few years later, somebody will write another book, and they'll use that first book as a source. And then after a while, all these books get written, and they cite sources from the other books. But in reality, unless you were there, you really don't know. You don't know what somebody is thinking. All we do is we read these books and we judge. And a lot of times history has it wrong. Now, let me give you an example about that. This is a model 1877 Colt Lightning revolver, double action 38. This is a gun that was from Billy the Kid's time period. He may have even had one of these. Now, of course, the hysterical historians, they all argue amongst themselves, and I'm not going to argue with you guys. But what we do know is of the guns that were confiscated when Billy the Kid was arrested and also when he was killed. So we do know what those are, but there's a large span of years. We don't know all the guns he had. We know that he went over to Arizona and he killed a man there, and he was involved in theft, and even in Luna, New Mexico, he was accused of stealing guns there. So we don't know what guns he was carrying when. But a lot of people assumed that Billy the Kid was left-handed. Now, the reason for that, why would you assume he's left-handed? Well, it's because of the only certified picture of Billy the Kid. The only one that has been authenticated is this old tintype. Now, if you notice on this tintype, Billy the Kid's pistol is on the left-hand side of his body. So historians used to think he was left-handed. And in fact, there was a movie made in 1958 starring Paul Newman called The Left-Handed Gun. And it was based on this notion that Billy the Kid was left-handed. Now, of course, in the grand scheme of things, that does not matter. But that's an example of how they got it wrong. How did they get it wrong? Well, pretty much every single tintype photograph, which is a metallic plate that soon as it's exposed to light, it captures the image right onto the plate. There is no negative. In other words, it's kind of like you looking at yourself in a mirror. Everything is flipped and reversed. And so a tintype is in reverse. So when you guys see old tintype photographs that are on glass plates, don't assume left is left and right is right, because left is right and right is left. I know that sounds confusing, but now here's further proof that historians and others got this wrong. This is a Winchester model 1873 lever action rifle. It is considered the rifle, the gun, that won the West. Now, Billy the Kid had one of these rifles, except he had the shorter version, which is the model 1873 carbine. But this is the same time period and was around when Billy the Kid had one of these things. Now, when Winchester manufactured this rifle and the carbine, they always put the place where you put the bullets. Some of you guys call them bullets, some of you guys call them rounds, some of you guys call them cartridges. It doesn't matter. It's where you put the bullets in the side. It's always on the right-hand side. So you'll notice in this tintype photo that the place you put the cartridges in, which is right here, in the photo, it is on the left side. That is incorrect. They were never made that way. The other thing we can tell from the photograph is he has a vest on, and the buttons are shown to be on his left-hand side. That is incorrect. Buttons back in the day were on the right-hand side for men and left-hand side for ladies' blouses. Now you might be thinking, why does it matter if Billy the Kid was left-handed or right-handed? It doesn't matter. But what it is it's an example of how a historian could get something wrong and it'll be widely accepted for a long time. And that's not the only example of this. It has happened to almost every history book that is written. It's from someone's perspective and they're making assumptions. Now, the movie industry is another thing because they have only 2 hours to show you someone's story. And so they have to condense a lot of things. They got to fill in a lot of gaps. So when movies are made, more assumptions are made. More wrong ideas are given. Now, my absolute favorite movie about Billy the Kid has to be hands down Young Guns, starring Emilio Estevez. I liked it. And I liked Young Guns 2. I did have a little bit of problem with Young Guns 2 because it is based on the assumption that this man from Texas named Brushy Bill Roberts, he came forward and said he's actually Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett didn't actually shoot him. Personally, I don't buy that because I don't think they're the same person. But this movie starts out with Brushy Bill's account, which is fine. It's good entertainment value, but probably not historically correct. Now, interestingly enough, just the other day, they said they're going to start filming Young Guns 3 over in New Mexico, and it is going to be directed by Emilio Estevez. Now, I really enjoyed Young Guns 1, Young Guns 2, even though they had to fill in a lot of gaps, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy the third one. But I'm not going to look at it like it's historically correct. It's based on a real life person and persons, but it's Hollywood. You got to cram a bunch of stuff in and make it appealing to the audiences. And sometimes you have to absolutely stretch the truth. And one of the things that I noticed in the movies, see this 1877 Colt Lightning? They did not do this. So Billy the Kid didn't spin his pistol, and neither did most of the other famous gunfighters. The reason that came into play is because of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. There was a lot of people he had in that show that travel around the country, and they did all kinds of tricks and things like that. Like Annie Oakley would shoot things behind her back. And so spinning was more to please the crowd. But when you're in a life and death situation, Billy the Kid was known to be really fast at pulling the gun. Because back in the day, you had to be fast. Now, Wyatt Earp said in his memoirs, he didn't have to be the first to draw. He just had to be the most accurate shot. And sometimes he waited for the guy to spastically shoot, and then he'd shoot him. So what do we actually know about Billy the Kid? We know a few things from historical documents, but we have to kind of fill in the gaps. We have to say, well, why would a kid do this? And so we make a lot of assumptions. What do we actually know about Billy the Kid? Well, it's a mixture of what we know and what we don't know. What we do not know is who Billy the Kid's father was. We know his mother was Catherine, and she took a husband named William Antrim. Now, Catherine, Billy the Kid's mother, along with her husband, brought their 2 boys to Silver City, New Mexico in 1873. Now, these 2 boys were Joseph Antrim and William Bonney. William Bonney would later become Billy the Kid. But Joseph and William were half-brothers, and they often called William Billy because of the fact that his stepfather was William Antrim, and it got confusing. So they started calling him Billy. Life was very hard back in those days in the West. And Catherine did her best to provide for her children. Now, William Antrim, on the other hand, was kind of a dreamer drifter, and he often neglected the family. But they managed to live in a cabin in Silver City while many others were living in tents because it was a mining area. So people were coming there for the gold and the silver and all of that. According to locals, the boys seemed to have a normal childhood. They would go to school, play games with friends after school. But Catherine had things much harder. Her husband was gone all the time. So what she ended up doing was people come and stay at their cabin, and she did their laundry. She fed them and cleaned and everything. And at the same time this was going on, she was suffering from tuberculosis, and this was only getting worse. And as time went on, Catherine started getting really sick. So despite having tuberculosis, Catherine continued to work hard supporting the kids until she ended up bedridden, and she was in bed for about 4 months, and then she did pass away in 1874 of tuberculosis. On a side note, Billy the Kid's mom's grave, as well as other graves, were moved to where they are now at Memory Lane Cemetery in Silver City, New Mexico. I have a deep connection to Memory Lane Cemetery. It is filled with the grave markers of dozens of people I once knew. Old bosses, friends, neighbors, classmates. So it is a flood of memories to me, but nothing compares to the fact that 2 of my boys are buried there. And here you can see in the photo my boys' graves, and Billy the Kid's mother's grave is right in the background. So they're not buried too far away from her. Now let's fast forward to 1878, where Billy the Kid was in Lincoln County, New Mexico. At the time, he worked for an Englishman named John Tunstall, who was in partnership with McSween and Chisholm. And they were into ranching, and they were trying to have a store in town, and John Tunstall even wanted to start a bank. At the time, Lincoln County was dominated economically and politically by a man named Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan. So Murphy and Dolan basically controlled everything in the area. They also had lucrative contracts with the United States government to supply beef to the United States Army. And so they pretty much wanted to drive Tunstall and his partners out any way they could. Murphy and Dolan also had the sheriff on their payroll, as well as a variety of gangs and cattle rustlers. So a lot of times they would rustle cattle and then sell them to the United States government. So Sheriff Brady was basically on the payroll and being controlled by the Murphy-Dolan group. And he formed a posse to go seize McSween's assets and John Tunstall's assets. And as they rode out there, one of Brady's men shot and killed John Tunstall. Now that was witnessed by Billy the Kid from a distance, as well as one other of the ranch hands. When John Tunstall was killed, the Lincoln County War began. On one side of the conflict, you had a very corrupt group of people that not only were controlling government, they were controlling law enforcement, and even the government of the territory of New Mexico owed L&G Murphy Company money. So this is where I'm going to stop the story, and I'm going to reflect on what it must have been like to be Billy the Kid. You're growing up in Silver City. Your stepfather's not around. He's off in the mountains somewhere. He's never helping or providing for your family. Your mother is dying of tuberculosis. She's coughing all the time, and yet she's working hard. Despite that, you're going to school and you're having a relatively normal childhood, and then one day your mom dies, and your stepfather is nowhere to be found. Later, he shows up, and he doesn't want anything to do with you. So I'm not saying Billy the Kid was innocent of everything. He was involved in some crimes, some robberies, some cattle rustling, killed a few people. Like over in Arizona, he actually shot a guy in the stomach that was on top of him, beating on him. Back in the day, I guess I might have done the same thing. So if I was Billy the Kid in Lincoln County and just witnessed the murder of my boss and my friend by a very, very corrupt organization who even had control of law enforcement, I probably would have done the same thing as Billy did. I would have volunteered to hunt those guys down, because even though they were the law and you have to follow the law, that law was not the law. That was a very corrupt group. And I think I would open up a can of whoop ass on them. So in conclusion, I tried my best to imagine what it would be like to be Billy the Kid, and I was probably way off the mark. But as you can imagine, when historians write books and report on history with so little information, they often get it wrong. When we look at historical biographies, we should look at it with a little bit of skepticism, because the person writing the biography doesn't have all of the facts, and they have a perspective, and they have their own motivation that they're trying to apply to the situation. So anyway, keep that in mind, guys.
Billy the Kid.